Hello and welcome. We are so excited to be on the I Love to Watch You Play Facebook page. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Kirsten Jones, a peak performance and sports parenting coach. And in addition to having 3 kids of my own and having been an athlete, now I'm on the other side coaching parents and their athletes. And we're in this amazing time right now of helping kids get back into sport. Some of the country, some of you have been playing all along, but a lot of us, we're out on the West Coast, are just getting going. So today, my partner in crime, Dr. Dolly Klock, and I wanted to talk to you about some topics that are on everybody's mind about how do we get back into it.
Great. It's so great to be here. I'm Dolly Klock. I am a family medicine physician. I'm a mom of 2 teens, and I run Adolescents, which is my company where I do a lot of parent ed, and I work with teens and tweens around a whole bunch of health-related topics, puberty, sexuality, body image, mental health, and of course, how all of that intersects with the digital age. And I love building community around these topics, as I know does Kirsten, and that's why we're so excited and grateful to Asia and to I Love to Watch You Play for allowing us to have some time with all of you with this wonderful community on this platform. And you know, as Kirsten said, we're both based in LA, where things have been really shut down for the last year, and now after spring break, some schools are starting to finally get back on campus in person in a hybrid fashion. And so Kirsten and I have been talking a lot about sort of this re-entry in this new phase of the pandemic as things are starting to open, and especially how that relates to raising athletes. And so Kirsten, since you see so many teen athletes and their parents, and I'm just curious, you know, what are you hearing? How are things going these days?
Yes, so we're just starting to get things going, and what we're seeing and hearing a lot of, and as I go to speak to schools and to clubs and to meet with kids and their parents, is this anxiety, this trepidation about, you know, they've been sitting behind a laptop for a year, and so now what do I do? How do I handle this? And you know, kind of nice to not have to get out of your sweatpants in the morning and you can log on into school. And I've been shooting baskets or working on my skills for whatever sport on my own, and so it's fine. I think I'm okay. And then what's happening is we're jumping from being on the deck of the pool to jumping into the deep end, and seeing a lot of kids and their parents respond to that by this overwhelming stress, anxiety, and you know, sometimes shutdown, because they said, wow, you know, I don't know that I can still do this. And so that's what we want to talk to you about today, is to not be overwhelmed by, you know, you're not going to go 0 to 100, nor should you. We want you to take baby steps to get back to where you were. It's going to be, you know, you're going to risk injury if you do it too soon. You're going to risk, you know, this fear of overwhelm and shutdown where you don't feel like you can perform your best. And you shouldn't feel like you have to. You should feel like you have this time, and hopefully you've got good coaches that are seeing that it's important for you to ease back into the sport, not just go, you know, 0 to 100 and feel like you can drop 30 in the first game that you're in, right? Are you seeing similar things with your practice and your teens? You're talking to teenagers and their parents, and they're getting ready to go back to school, or starting a little bit of that. How is that going?
Well, it's been quite the road, as you know. I mean, I think particularly because we are living in an area that has been so shut down, and really the mental health, you know, of our young people has been at the forefront of my mind over this time. And so I just want to like take a moment just to acknowledge that we've all had such very wildly different experiences during this pandemic. And so like to anyone who maybe has lost a loved one or has, you know, gone through a true trauma, our hearts are out for you. But really, we've all experienced loss, right? And this has been, because it's gone on for so long, it has been a type of a cumulative trauma for all of us. And when we think about adolescents, you know, the state of their mental health was already troubling prior to the pandemic, right? And now there's a lot of evidence that our kids are really struggling and having worsening mental health. And just to give a few statistics, just so we really know what we're talking about, because I think people feel so alone and they feel like they're alone in their struggles, and you really aren't. So Common Sense Media just released results of a really interesting survey of teens' mental health, and they found that 38% of 14 to 22-year-olds reported symptoms of moderate to severe depression. We know from the CDC that mental health visits to ERs for 12 to 17-year-olds has increased during the pandemic. And I don't know if you remember, but back in the summer, the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine did a study of high school athletes. And it showed that over 2/3 of the kids surveyed reported anxiety and depression at levels that would typically require medical intervention. And that was a 37% increase from past studies. And they're not getting the physical activity that they all want and need. They found a 50% decrease in our teens' physical activity levels. And we know how important that is for mental health. And adults are struggling as well. So truly, if you are not alone, if you are experiencing something like this, and there's so much stigma around mental health, but I do feel like that piece is shifting. Thankfully, people are seemingly a little bit more open to talking about all of that. But just from the positive, like I do feel like there is, I'm hearing so much more hope, so much more optimism as more and more people are getting vaccinated. And I am so excited that in the last week, suddenly out of nowhere, I feel like I'm seeing all these kids wearing their sports uniforms and like loading their equipment into cars all around my community. And it just is making me so happy to see that. So Kirsten, yeah.
Sorry, one of the other silver linings that you've talked about in the past, which I love too, is, you know, while we've been home, but one of the benefits for our teens is the amount of sleep they've been able to get,
yes.
right?
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that I'm a big proponent of sleep because it's so important for our health and our immune systems and our emotional regulation and all of that. And that's going to shift now as people, you know, have commutes again, for sure. So I'm curious because you were just at your first travel volleyball tournament in a really long time. And I have not yet re-entered that with my daughter yet. So like, what should I expect? What should we all be expecting, you know, for those of us whose kids have not been participating on a competitive level in that way and are jumping back in? Like, how do we support them?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're living on the East Coast, this may not be relevant to you. I mean, our different parts of the country have basically, you know, maybe not completely things completely normal, but they've been doing variations on this. But yeah, we had the first experience going to the East Coast and playing volleyball in Atlanta, and to walk into a convention of 200 volleyball courts with 4 teams per court with all of the adults, and everybody's masked up. It felt very safe. But was interesting when watching the girls compete for the first time, which is so different than just practicing, right? They've been practicing a lot. We've been going to the beach and working out. Luckily we have good weather here and you can do that. But going into a gym and being in that mindset and being down points and trying to come back and having that adversity and the stress that comes with that. What I heard a lot of them talk about was their anxiety. I actually met with them one of the mornings before they played and said, let's talk about what's going on. And they said, you know, I have this anxiety to perform. I haven't been doing this for a year and I don't know if I'm handling it right. And one thing I like, Dr. Lisa DeMoore talks a lot about the difference between anxiety and excitement. And yes, there are situations where that's true. It is anxiety, but performance is usually about, you want your blood pumping because that's how you're going to perform well. And when we haven't done it for a long time, we might conflate those two and think, oh, I have too much anxiety, I can't perform. But in fact, you just need to lean into that a little bit and push through that emotion so that you can get to the other side of it, which is usually where the freedom is. And sure enough, the girls got going as the weekend got on, and they you know, started to perform at a better level. In fact, the head of the club came over and watched them play, and they got blown out in the match. And she came over and she said, I don't know what you expect. She's like, a lot of these kids have been playing for a very long time, you know, and not only just practicing, but actually getting to compete. And when we haven't been competing every day, it's a different muscle. It's a different set of anxieties that we deal with when we perform like that. So she said, we give yourself some, you know, some breathing room to get back into the swing of it. So the advice I would have to parents that haven't done that yet, don't expect to walk in and win the whole thing. Don't expect to walk in and score, you know, ace after ace after ace, or, you know, for whatever your sport is. But walk in to say, what can I do? What am I curious about that I've been working on, that I'm going to pick one thing that I'm going to do really well in this match? I'm going to focus on that, or this swimming contest, or this tennis match. Don't get overwhelmed with, I've got to go in there and play perfect. It's not not only is it not realistic, but it's not helpful to you. It's not what you need to be focused on, right?
Yeah,
So
I love that.
it's coming, and we need to take it in small little bites and wade in through the shallow end and allow the transition to happen. What about with schools and kids going back to school and mental health? What are you advising your clients with that? What are you seeing with parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another really interesting phenomenon that's happening in terms of, we all want so badly for life to go back to normal, and yet here we are, where it's starting to happen, and suddenly people are like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, maybe I'm not so ready, right? So I am hearing, like, from parents. I was just talking with a parent a few days ago whose son had been going to school. He was an elementary schooler, so he had been going twice a week in person, hybrid. And now after spring break, it was going to be every day. And she said, I kind of like the 2-day thing. I don't know if I'm ready for every day. And with some of the teens that I work with, it's been really interesting because for many of them, it's optional, whether they're going to go back in person or not. And I know a lot that are opting out. And this is where I get a little uncomfortable, because there's absolutely, some have very legitimate reasons for opting out, right? Like a health condition or something like that. But others are just sort of like, they've gotten comfortable sitting in their sweats in their room all day, or their pajamas all day. And where I worry a little is for the kids who I think have some underlying social anxiety, where a lot of issues were relieved, by going into the pandemic. It got rid of a lot of the stressors for them, and they've gotten very comfortable, and they're going to need support with that reentry.
So if you're a parent of a child like that who's like, oh, this is great, I'm not going back. What advice do you have for the parents? How do you coach them out of their sweatpants and into their uniform or into their school clothes?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think as with everything with teens, starting with empathy, come at it with empathy, and try to get at what's underneath it all. And some kids, haven't had practice socializing if they've been really locked down. So maybe we need to sort of find ways for them to safely socialize with small groups, one or two other people. Some kids who have, kind of have germophobia now and are, worried about this. So like baby steps, easing them into it, but avoiding, if they're really anxious, avoiding that situation is going to feel good to them and be really effective, in the short term, but that's not a reasonable way of coping in the long term, right? So we do need to go. And some kids are going to need extra support. They're going to need some, to see a mental health specialist and get extra support there for sure. But just something to be thinking about and looking out for.
Good.
Yeah. So I know we want to keep it brief here, because everyone's been spending so much time on Zooms and stuff. So like you and I were talking the other day, and you came up with this amazing thing, the 3 Gs. Tell us about the 3 Gs, Kirsten.
Okay. So this is my latest thing in helping parents and helping their athletes, right? And I tell this directly to the athletes. Actually, last night I spoke to a high school basketball, the freshman JV and varsity team. And it really, the 3 Gs of getting through this and getting is coming with some coping skills. So number 1 is gratitude, right? And there are kids still that aren't able to, or don't have the means to, or have other health issues. What are the things that you are grateful for today in this moment? The fact that I got to travel to this tournament, the fact that I got to get in the gym, the fact that I got to play again, right? Those things are so foundational to us moving forward. And by the way, high tides raise all boats. So the more gratitude you show, the more it comes back to you and rewards you, right? So, and by the way, that works, whether you're an individual or a team sport person, but helping, if you're a swimmer, you got to help your teammates, even if you're not, relying on them for your score. Just you spreading that around to everybody else is gonna come back to you. Number 2 is getting grounded. One thing we talk a lot about in mental health and mindset and peak performance is, what are you doing off the court, off the field, out of the pool to prepare for that competition? And one of the best things you can do is meditation, mindfulness, breathing. When we get into fight or flight, when we think that, it was 1,000 years ago, it was the saber-toothed tiger chasing us. Thank goodness we don't have the saber-toothed tiger, but stepping up to the free throw line when, there's 2 seconds on the clock, it might as well be a saber-toothed tiger breathing down your neck. So having the skill set before you even get on the court of taking 5 deep breaths before you start your game, talking to each other, getting grounded. Some mindfulness, other mindfulness exercises are journaling every day, writing down 3 goals that you're going to, today in this game, I'm going to, make sure that I'm scrapping on every play, that I'm hustling, and that I'm cheering the loudest if I'm not getting on the court. What can I do with my position and where I am right now to help the team and to help my performance? And number 3 are goals. So we all have big, audacious goals of, I want to, what I want to do with my life, but what do I want to do in the next 3 months, in the next month? About, okay, for us in LA now, all of a sudden they have a basketball season. 3 weeks ago, we weren't playing any basketball. Now all of a sudden, you got 8 weeks to figure it out. What are things that you can do that you can chunk down into, okay, here's a goal for the next 8 weeks. Here's a goal for today. In fact, I'm working with a client I met with yesterday who I love, and he's given himself, he's a tennis player, he's given himself a goal of, I'm going to do 30 burpees a day. And he gets up every morning and he does 10 in the morning, he does 10 at lunch, and he does 10 at before dinner. But he said, well, now I'm going to school, I'm not going to really do burpees on, at lunch. That might not look very good. He said, I said, why don't you flip it? Maybe you do 15 and 15. He's like, oh, that's a good idea. So we need to be, thinking outside the box a little bit as we adjust, your schedule's going to start changing, but being focused on these 3 things: gratitude, being grounded, finding tools to help ground yourself, and then setting some little short-term goals. And again, they can be as simple as, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths before I start the game. It's simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but that's how we start to move through this.
I love it. I love your 3 Gs. And as we were talking about, I just thought of a 4th. Can I add a 4th G?
Yes, please.
All right. My 4th G is just to be gentle with yourself and with your kids during this time of transition. Because again, this, hopefully those who are transitioning back are excited and it's going to be fun and wonderful. But just keep in mind that for some people, this is, change is anxiety provoking. So keeping that in mind, especially, when kids are going back to school for the first time in a year, I mean, you can expect they're going to be a little cranky at the end of the day. They're going to be more tired. They're actually in person with all these people in 3D. They haven't all done that in a long time, right? And so it's all going to take some getting used to, but they will readjust. We just have to give them time and grace. And we have to do that for ourselves too, because the logistics of our family lives is shifting, right? And so I love the deep breaths for sure, and be gentle.
Yes, I love gentle. And it's so true. I heard a psychologist speaking the other day, and they said, change, good or bad, is stressful, right? So
absolutely.
Even if we're going to, it's positive, it's moving in the right direction, it's what we want, doesn't mean it's not stressful. So for all of us, right? So, give yourself some time to adjust to this new schedule, to this new way of doing life again, and embrace it, and find ways to celebrate it, and find ways to help your child and your athlete move down the path together.
So great. Well, thank you for doing this with me, and thanks again to Asia. And I love to watch you play. We're hoping to make this a recurring series of Wellness Wednesdays. We'll be back again at some point in the near future, and just so great to be with this community.
Yes, thank you for having us. Wellness Wednesdays, feel free to drop, if you're watching this on replay, which I know probably most of you are, drop in the questions that are burning questions. We would love to come back on every Wednesday and answer your questions and help you through this. We're all in this together, and we need to, we have different situations, but we can help one another. Teamwork is the dream, makes the dream work. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.